This is going to be going over the group summon for all of the summer units. First, let's go over the general mechanics for a group summon. It's just you can pick 3 units to put on your banner out of the 9 listed here, with the bottom 2 not being available, and then each time you summon, you get 1 coin. These coins can be spent in a shop to purchase either the unit or the artifact or some other stuff. This is essentially what is called a sparking banner, instead of the traditional pity banner that Epic 7 usually uses. And this is really nice just because if you're rolling, and let's say you hit Frida while you're rolling, you'll still have your coins. So this essentially doesn't refresh your pity. And before we talk about these placements, we should also mention the existence of these limited bookmarks, because the ones that we got from Epic Dash will expire on August 28th, which is also when this banner ends, essentially. And there is also this summon event. Basically, the way it works is every time you use 30 Covenant bookmarks, not including these temporary ones, you'll have a 50% chance of getting 5 twin bookmarks or 10. This is pretty much just giving you a couple of free summons on top of what you're rolling. This isn't really an incentive to roll a ton. You should factor in stuff like, do you have enough resources for any potential upcoming limiteds, like the 2 units that won the Global Art Contest, which I think was Sigrid and Biblis, and the 2 units that won over in China, which was Knockle and somebody else, I don't remember. That's potentially 4 limited units. This is just pretty much free bookmarks. Nice of them to just give us free bookmarks, and for the ones that we have for Epic Dash, you might just want to spend them here. If there's no other banners that get announced, you could wait a little bit if you want. So now let's go over the general placements for these units. At the very bottom, of course, the not available tier, we've got ARAM and Argent Waves Hua Young, plus their artifacts are not available, being too recent, of course. And then let's go over the units and the artifacts. Let's start off with the units. For the S tier unit, it's really just Frida. I think Frida is just such an insane QOL unit to have for Arena and Guild War. Her giving you a free soul burn, plus her being a really good bridge, with her getting CR when somebody soul burns, and also giving everybody attack buff, means she gets used in a lot of comps in Arena and Guild War. Even if you're not too confident in your speed, there's a lot of teams where they're just super slow, and you can just slam them with an opener Frida plus DPS, or certain defenses in Arena, where I run the B-Dom Frida sort of turn 2 cleave team into those. So just really nice unit to have if you are somebody who has New Moon Luna or even Zio. She works with so many openers. Definitely worth picking up, and probably the most important unit on this banner, I would say. Second is Festivita, who I think after her buffs, she's really good now. I've pretty much been a big believer in her buffs ever since they released the notes, where she just deals an insane amount of fixed damage on her S2 after you get the shyness. So she has some things that she's going to work into really well. She does still have her issues, of course, like her S2 proc condition can be hard to work around. If you're trying to use her into something like Witch of the Mere Tenebria, if she presses S3 and you 15% the strip, unlucky, your shyness isn't going to proc, you're not going to cleanse. And also something like if you are running her with a barrier, light amounts of damage won't remove your stealth, and if you 15% a strip, then light amounts of damage won't remove your stealth, that sort of thing. So she has her weaknesses, but she should be a really strong unit to use. So I would say she is probably the second most important unit here. And then once you get down here to definitely the C tier, I would not really look at, but even the B tier, I would say maybe start thinking about how much you want these units versus some of the artifacts. But we'll start by going over these units first. First up is Holiday Yufine. This unit is kind of just used as an anti-cleave unit. Some people will run her into things like Litica last season was one thing, just because she can dodge the hit, cleanse everybody. I've also heard people talk about just using her to just kill things with Gators with her S1 double burn. I also frequently hear her called a very inconsistent garbage unit. So I think she is kind of just a unit that is frequently present, but not super good. If you're talking about her PvE usage, she was really good, for 2 months, and now she's kind of garbage again because there is no longer any reason to use her for Trial of the Constellations, thanks to the nerfs that they made to the difficulty of the game mode, where you just do Nightmare now, and even when you're doing Perdition, you have all of your trees completely maxed out. There's My Clear in level 4, using Cameron plus 3 3-stars. There's also Grass Angels Clear, using, I think it was Aram, Hazel, Hades, and Tieria at level 3, which is a lot tighter and hard to gear, I think. But that one doesn't require you to actually hit level 4, which is really, really nice. So this Holiday Euphina unit just has zero purpose in PvE now, and she is back to being completely useless. Very, very nice. And then there is Seaside Bologna. Seaside Bologna, I'm sure she can Wyvern 13 one-shot, but no one really cares about that. There's replacements for that, and it's not very high priority content. For her PvP usage, she will get picked sometimes in RTA. I don't think she is like a super strong unit to the point where she's someone you prioritize, especially because of how much investment she requires. I would gear Seaside Bologna if I had to, just because I already have a plus 30 drink from when she was really good. But at this point, I would never recommend anybody to bottle Rengar Special Drink. You just kind of live with it being plus 15 because your bottles are much better spent on better artifacts, or even just held for future situations. So I think she's really high investment just to be okay, so she is kind of just down here. But a potential pickup if you want. And then for the C tier units, there is Ocean Breeze Luluka, who is really just... She is a cleanser with a bit of defensive utility with her Ice Cream and her defense buff, but there's just too many openers that can just work around her now, and she doesn't exactly do enough. There's probably some really niche tech you can use with her, but not high priority enough to recommend her generally. Summertime Asaria, she is just really inconsistent, I think, and hard to play around. It just doesn't do enough. Summer Break Charlotte got her buffs. She is kind of a Zeo bridge now, but I think she is just worse than all of the other ones. Like, she's worse than Afternoon Soak Flan. And even if you don't have her, I think you would rather just not play that sort of comp than use Summer Break Charlotte. You could even use something like Euphine or whatever. I don't think the buffs do enough for her, honestly. And then there is Leaf, who just... her hit, and with this much Penres in the game, it's too hard for her to really kill things. Plus injury, she's just got way too many weaknesses. Even in a Guild War setting, where you can control what you're fighting against, there's going to be much easier ways to kill whatever you're fighting than using Leaf. Then there is Cerise, who is kind of just a light expedition unit at this point, but there are a ton of replacements for her too. You would only really use her if you happen to hit her while rolling for her artifact, but even then you'd have to invest the molas and it might not really be worth it. Now let's get over to the artifacts, and like I said, these artifacts, probably once you pass Festivita, you might want to start considering what artifacts you want, because none of these units are super high priority down here, I think. Soul Constellation is just really, really good for any sort of Soul Weaver that wants to stack F-Res and has a decent amount of, like, disruption or way to, like, cut in and stop what your opponent's trying to do. Its CR pushes you when your enemy uses a non-attack skill. Also just gives them a ton of F-Res, so stuff like DJ Bazaar, Infinite Horizon Acades are common users of this. Of course, Ocean Breeze Luluka, if she was any good, would also uses this artifact a lot. And you might see this on Death Dealer Ray sometimes. So I think the effect is just pretty generalized. Like, there's just so many Soul Weavers that could use this, even if they release future units. So I think it's worthy of its spot here. This is definitely a really nice artifact to have one or two of. The kind of alternative to this is Eternus. The proc condition is really, really different, but it's the similar kind of, like, fighting against debuffers, except that one only works against debuffs, while this one only works against non-attack skills. So it's not really a side grade, upgrade, or whatever, it's just an alternative option. And then there is Guiding Light, which is definitely not as strong as it used to be, but it's still used on some rangers, like Hellion Lua can use this really well, or if you are playing Litica and you are slow, you could use this. Cleavers especially, I think, kind of want this because stuff like Veronica and Wanderer Silk can use this really well. So depending on what you have, this is probably worth a pickup. It's just a lot of openers. Rangers these days just get Guiding Light for free. Even non-openers like Eligos, Landy, Paulus all have it at this point. And then when you're playing something like Briar Witch or Litica, when those units were used, you would rather just outspeed and use Renewed Will or something. So this artifact isn't like SS tier like it used to be, but it's still pretty good, I would say. There's also Prayer of Solitude. Prayer of Solitude is mainly used for either Emma Aria, so she has some alternatives. So if you have her and you have the alternatives like Durandal or Crow Arti, which I've seen people use, even if Prayer of Solitude is maybe the best, you can see what you like the most. It's just like you have to think about there being alternatives and whether or not you want to spend a summon slot on this, because this is also tied to Leaf. It was pretty useless. Guiding Light is also tied to Cerise, but so this could be used for her if you want. It's also being used on some HP stackers. There's the Straze anti-cleave units like Assassin Cartusia and where people are using this just to stack HP. Valencia also uses this pretty well, though she is not a super high priority unit. I think this artifact is probably the strongest it's been in a while, so potentially worth a pickup if you want it. There's also Magic Bubble Maker. This artifact gives you a ton of effectiveness and has a pretty nice debuff pool, so stuff like mainly Harsetti and Witch the Mere Tenebria, you'll see use this, maybe some Solitarias. They also have alternatives though, because they are mages, they could just hold book. There's also Fairy Tale of a Nightmare. But since all of these units have alternatives, and this isn't necessarily their best in slot, kind of just down here instead. This artifact is tied to Festivita, so you might just end up hitting it while you're rolling for her. There's also Spotted Mouse Hair Tie. This artifact is tied to Frida, and this one, I think it's hard to justify getting it to plus 30, guarantee its effect, where you get 10 souls at the start of the combat, and then after somebody soul burns, you have a chance to get another 10, 100% at plus 30. It's a lot of investment to do that when Bird's Eye View is generally good enough, especially with Bird's Eye View in the powder shop right now. But I do think that if you happen to hit this while rolling for Frida, it's really nice to have around. Like, there's sometimes 10 souls is enough. BBK Soulburn is 10 souls. So a lot of times you can just make this work at plus 10, just slap it on a random unit that you frequently use, and you want 10 souls for a certain comp, and then you don't have to move your Bird's Eye View around. So I think this is nice to have, but not something you really want to prioritize, letting it land here. Star of the Deep Sea is tied to Summertime Assyria. It is her best in slot, but nobody cares because she kind of sucks. It is also Pirate Captain Flawn's best in slot, and Pirate Captain Flawn is also not really a unit, I think, that is good enough for you to really be prioritizing this artifact to the point where you would pick it over the options up here. But if you really want to play Pirate Captain Flawn, then follow your dreams. Pick Star of the Deep Sea. She is pretty much unplayable without this artifact. A slight misconception about this artifact is that people say it has to be plus 30 to be usable. I don't necessarily agree with that, just because the artifact is RNG even at plus 30. Sure, it's a 100% chance to proc. However, the proc is a debuff, so the debuff itself is subject to 15%. Of course, you definitely want plus 30 just for better consistency, you're just still not guaranteed to land your debuff. And then there is Rengar Special Drink, which I've mentioned is tied to Seaside Bologna. This artifact is really only used on her or on really niche, like, cheese situations. And it needs plus 30 for consistency. It's just way too much investment to get to plus 30 in this day and age. So if you want to play Seaside Bologna, like, a single copy of this plus 15 is going to be decent. Champion's Trophy is tied to Holiday Euphine, and this one, it does give a ton of effectiveness for warriors. I think the only one that's comparable is Circus Fantasia, but Circus Fantasia's effectiveness goes down as you attack, and this one just lasts the whole fight, plus a chance to stun on S1, but really nobody's really using this. Like, the only time this artifact popped up was for MLPera recently, but MLPeras have all swapped builds over to Uberius, or even It's either Uberius or there's like some still on Sweet Miracle. No one's really using Champions Trophy anymore. I don't think this is an artifact you prioritize, especially because there are alternatives to this artifact. So this gets to be down here. And then Mature Sunglasses I just think sucks. It's a Night Bruiser artifact, but there's so many better options. More if you want a Night Bruiser artifact, just use Victorious Flag. There's Elbrus for some of these units. There's 3F or Moas, RPG. Like, all of the Night Bruisers just end up using different artifacts, and there's not much of a spot for Mature Sunglasses, I think. You'll see people use this sometimes. I think that's just because they have it and they ran out of artifacts. This artifact is not very good. So that is kind of just it for the Summer Group Summon. I don't even know if I'm rolling on this, honestly. I have the 30 summons, I think, left to spend, though I might just wait a couple of weeks and see if we get any new unit announcements. But hopefully it's helped anybody who's trying to summon on this banner, especially if you're just a newer player trying to get Frida and Festivita, and you have some your third slot, you're not sure what to get.